It's like you don't consciously say, ooh, that person looks scary because they're black, I'm gonna cross the street, but that's what you do. And then you wonder why students of color feel uncomfortable on this campus, and it's because we're made to feel like we don't necessarily belong here.
It all started when a school committee sent an email to students before Halloween asking them not to wear any culturally unaware and insensitive costumes that might offend minorities. A faculty member responded with an email encouraging students to dress however they want. That email got some students very upset, and it led to a confrontation on campus with her husband, who also works at the university. Watch.
It is not about creating an intellectual space. It is not. Do you understand that? It's about creating a home here. You are not doing that.
You're supposed to be our advocate.
These freshmen come here, they think this is what Yale is? Do you hear that? They're going to leave. They're going to transfer because you are a poor steward of this community. You should not sleep at night.
Unconscious bias is having a strong feeling about someone or something without being aware of it. Almost stereotypical.
You can look at unconscious bias from what's in media right now. So in a political season, presidential campaigning, presidential debates, there's a lot of unconscious bias.
I think women all over this country heard very clearly what Mr. Trump said.
I think she's got a beautiful face, and I think she's a beautiful woman.
I see unconscious or implicit bias as the bias that we all have, every single person in our society, that we're not aware of. And that bias does impact the way we perceive, interact, and deal with others.
Specifically last semester, the two events that sparked everything was an email and a frat party. And so they both happened on Halloween weekend, which is why I think there was heightened national attention for it. First, we have an intercultural affairs committee, and they sent out an email leading up to Halloween just saying, Halloween is coming up. When you're picking your Halloween costumes, be conscious of how they may make other people feel. Here are some questions you can ask yourself, such as, does this make fun of someone's culture? Does this make fun of someone's religion? Things like that. And then at Yale, we have residential colleges, and the associate master of one of the residential colleges sent out a follow-up email in response to that, saying that she felt it was too much of them to ask us to stifle ourselves, and that there should be space for students to be a little obnoxious, and that if we see a costume that offends us, that we should look away or try to engage the person, which really ignores a lot of the realities of situations like that. And so what happened as a result was a Native American student saw two men in headdresses and approached them to have a conversation, and they verbally and sexually assaulted her and ran off, and this happened in front of a bar, and no one said anything, and I don't know if to this day there has been an investigation into finding those two men. So that was the first instance.
People aren't usually aware of their biases. One of the worst things that you can say to another American is you're sexist, you're racist, or you're bigoted. Anytime you say that to somebody, they're going to be insulted, and they're going to say, "Oh, I'm not." I mean, you could tell Donald Trump he's bigoted, and he would really get kind of mad at you. You know, he'd say, "Oh, I'm not." So, so because people don't like to admit that everybody has biases, it becomes very, very dangerous, because then they're sure that everybody else is wrong and they're perfect. Never deal with someone who's perfect. So just talking to people doesn't work. You have to put them in a situation, I think, where somebody actively discriminates against them so that they can understand how it feels, perhaps. Microaggressions can be just just little slips of the tongue, little things.
I'll say things in class or in the section, and then it's like crickets, and then someone will say like the exact same thing with like a bigger word or two, and it was like yeah, or like someone will say, I think she meant to say, like things like that. It's like, nope, I know what I meant to say, and you don't need to speak for me, I can speak for myself. And just assuming that I don't know or I'm ignorant to certain things because of who I am. We've been throwing around the word microaggressions a lot last semester, but that's like a big part of unconscious bias, is that, you know, before you get to know me, you have preconceived ideas of me based on the color of my skin, the texture of my hair, the width of my nose, things of that nature. And if you behave towards me in a way as a result of that and not as a result of you actually knowing who I am as a person, that's a bias.
Unconscious bias actually makes us internalize these messages we hear about in society and start to believe them about ourselves, start to believe that we as individuals aren't good enough, or we don't have what it takes to succeed. And so the more we hear these messages, the more we start to believe them. And that impact on an individual, specifically a young person, could impact them for the rest of their life.
Students of color on campus are like constantly dealing with like mental health issues from this and from internalizing that. And your grades suffer because once you start to internalize, you're like, well, why bother? And like that's a big issue that goes under discussed because we don't have mental health professionals of color to like acknowledge like the impacts of being at a predominantly white institution where it's like very elitist. And so if you're like a first generation student of color, like you have all the cards stacked against you, and it's really difficult. They held a forum at the African American Cultural Center where students could just come and just like really get a lot of feelings off of their chest, and like other students could come and hear, because there's been a really big part of this conversation is like women of color not being centered at the root of these things, and just not being able to like express like, I'm in pain, like this is how, and like no one is listening or cares, and there's nowhere, like no one is taking this information. And that forum, I think it was supposed to be for like an hour and a half, and it went for 5 hours, with students of color just getting up and like doing specific examples of like instances where they have felt explicitly and implicitly unwanted on campus. And so one that I mentioned was being on campus, walking around with friends, and like this older white woman like yelled out of her car, since when did they start letting so many black kids into Yale?
It's important to try to see in yourself where that stereotype comes from, how you're viewing other people, because if you don't, you'll just keep insulting them, and in that sense, engaging in microaggressions.
Everyone has unconscious bias, but when you act on that and that manifests in white girls only or things that have happened in other times on this campus, that's when it becomes a problem for the mental safety of students of color.
To wrap up, do you have any final comments, like how people should look at implicit bias? What if you had one sentence to say about it, what would it be?
Well, my one sentence would be that people should learn more about it and then share it with their friends and family. That's the way that we're ultimately going to get the impact we need. This is not something that should be targeted at one group or one profession. Everyone should have this conversation and really engage in it. So I think it's about spreading the word more than anything else.
Making people see what they're doing. You cannot obliterate bias unless you get people to understand that they have biases, that they have prejudices, that they say racist things and do racist things, because if you're not aware of the impact that your words and actions have on other people and the way they may harm other people, you have no reason to stop.